What happens when the South stops being the place the entertainment industry edits down and becomes the raw material the entertainment industry can no longer afford to sanitize? Nah, for real. Sit with that for a second. Because once you understand that question, Ella Langley stops looking like just a country singer. Diego Pavia stops looking like just a quarterback. Theo stops looking like just a comedian popping up in random places. They start looking like evidence. Evidence of a market shift. Evidence that the traits institutions used to correct are now the same traits institutions are trying to monetize. And that right there is the whole machine. The South used to get cleaned up before it got exported. Smooth out the accent, calm down the roughness, make the woman attractive but not too sovereign, make the athlete confident but not too disruptive, make the comedian funny but not too uncomfortable, make the region useful but not too regionally specific. That was the old filter, but now the filter broke. Now the accent is the asset. The roughness is the asset. The weirdness is the asset. The cockiness is the asset. The haircut is the asset. The chip on the shoulder is the asset. And the institution is sitting there looking confused because the exact thing it used to call a problem is now the thing producing the highest attention yield. That is crazy. But it is also extremely efficient because the market does not care if something is respectable. The market cares if it travels. And that is the key word here. Travel. Can the look travel? Can the accent travel? Can the clip travel? Can the personality travel? Can the regional detail become legible to people who have never lived inside that region? If the answer is yes, then congratulations. You are no longer just a person. You are exportable mythology. And that is the Southern spectacle economy. Now, I need to say this cleanly. This is not about saying Ella Langley is fake. This is not about saying Diego Pavia is manufactured. This is not about saying Theo is some cynical puppet master. That would be lazy. The real point is colder than that. The person can be real and the machine can still be real. Both things can be true. Ella can be genuinely magnetic while also becoming an extremely scalable visual product. Pavia can be genuinely electric while also becoming an NIL era character asset. Theo can be genuinely funny while also functioning as authenticity infrastructure. That is where basic analysis collapses. People think manufactured means fake. No, manufactured can also mean framed. It can mean selected. It can mean repeated. It can mean a real quality gets pulled out of a person, given a visual system, attached to a market, and then circulated until everybody starts calling it natural. That is the game. The first thing we have to understand is that this is a reclassification event. I do not mean that in a cute way. I mean the culture has changed the accounting category of roughness. In the old system, roughness was a liability. Too regional, too loud, too hard to manage, too hard to explain to advertisers, too difficult for the university, too unpredictable for the label, too unpolished for the campaign. The institution would see the voltage and immediately try to step it down. Calm it, polish it, contain it, make it safer, make it less dangerous. Make it less alive. But now the entire market has reversed. The public does not trust smoothness anymore. Smoothness feels like a press release. Smoothness feels like a communications department. Smoothness feels like 3 brand managers sitting around a glass table saying the word authenticity until it loses all meaning. Nah, people are tired of that. People trust friction now. They trust the detail that looks too specific to be invented. They trust the person who looks like they came into the system sideways. They trust the woman with the signature bangs that seem almost too imperfect to be calculated. They trust the quarterback who looks like he is about to turn Vanderbilt football into a personal vendetta. They trust Theo because he makes famous people sound like they still got family problems and unpaid emotional invoices. That is the new media premium. Not perfection, friction. But here's the twist. It cannot be pure friction. Pure friction does not scale. Pure chaos is not a business model. Pure mess is not a campaign. Pure rebellion is too unstable for sponsors. The machine does not want total unpredictability. It wants controlled unpredictability. That is the phrase. Controlled unpredictability. Enough edge to feel real, enough structure to monetize, enough roughness to create trust, enough polish to keep the sponsors comfortable. That is why this moment is so powerful. The people involved still feel human, but the system around them is becoming very advanced. Ella Langley is not just being seen, she is being formatted. Diego Pavia is not just being celebrated, he is being repriced. Theo is not just being funny, he is being used as a converter. And what is he converting? Polish into humanity, celebrity into relatability, institutional access into porch conversation. Now take Ella Langley. The bangs are not just bangs. The bangs are a recognition system. That matters more than people think. A famous person does not become iconic because people know their name. A famous person becomes iconic when the public can reconstruct them from fragments. One silhouette, one phrase, one gesture, one posture, one sound, one flaw that repeats. That is what people miss about image. Image is not beauty. Image is memory engineering. Perfect beauty is often weak image architecture because it has no handle. The eye slides across it. Beautiful? Yes. Distinct? No. Expensive? Yes. Ownable? Maybe not. Ella's look has a handle. The bangs, the denim, the gaze, the controlled roughness, the I know exactly what I'm doing, but I'm not going to explain myself to you posture. That is a much stronger commercial object than generic attractiveness. And the eyelash glue detail is almost too perfect. Not because it proves anything private about her. It does not. We are not reading her mind here. We are reading function. The public hears eyelash glue and thinks, oh, she is real. The brand hears eyelash glue and thinks, oh, this is a signature. The fan hears maintenance. The machine hears repeatability. That is the divide. Modern femininity in public life has a strange burden. It has to show labor, but not too much labor. It has to be aspirational, but not alien. It has to be natural, but visibly chosen. It has to look effortless while giving the audience one small proof that effort exists. That proof is emotionally valuable. If she looked fully perfected, she would be easier to dismiss as manufactured. If she looked fully raw, she would be harder to scale commercially. But optimized imperfection sits in the sweet spot. That is what makes the image travel. The bangs say, there is a flaw here, but the flaw has been disciplined. The denim says, this is casual, but the casualness has been styled. The stage look says, this is Southern, but it is commercially legible. The whole system says she is not being turned into something else. The market has found the parts of her that were already magnetic and built a frame around them. That is why the American Eagle connection makes sense. Denim is not just clothing in this context. Denim is class theater. It says work, but sells leisure. It says grit, but photographs clean. It says Americana, but moves through digital campaigns. It says low maintenance, while requiring an entire machinery of lighting, styling, brand language, festival placement, and audience targeting. That is why country denim branding is so efficient. It lets a brand borrow regional credibility without saying, we are borrowing regional credibility. It lets the artist borrow mass retail distribution without looking like she abandoned her roots. Everybody gets laundered through the gene. The audience does not experience that as strategy. They experience it as vibe. And that is the point. The more advanced the machine becomes, the more it has to look like a vibe. Because the public no longer trusts the old signals. They do not trust perfection. They do not trust statements. They do not trust glossy campaigns that feel like they came out of a boardroom and had their soul removed by a junior strategist named Connor. They trust friction. They trust the flaw that looks lived in. They trust the detail that feels too specific to be invented. They trust the woman who looks like she could headline a festival, roast a man, sell jeans, lose sleep, glue her bangs down, and still walk out like she does not owe the room an explanation. That is not fake. It is tactical. Big difference. Fake means the surface replaces the person. Tactical means the person understands which parts of the surface carry power. Now slide over to Pavia. Different world, same machine. The mistake people make with Pavia is that they only analyze him as a quarterback. That is incomplete. He is also an NIL era character asset. That sounds cold because it is cold, but it is true. Before NIL, a player like Pavia could produce enormous emotional value for a school without that value being priced in any direct way. He could give the program oxygen. He could make fans care. He could turn a dead Saturday into a living one. He could give Vanderbilt football a pulse. And the institution would say, thank you for your service. Maybe a scholarship, maybe applause, maybe a framed jersey, maybe a little folklore. But the monetary upside of the mythology would flow mostly around him, not to him. That was the old deal. The NIL era breaks that deal. Not completely, do not be naive. The new system still has gatekeepers, collectives, agents, donor politics, legal ambiguity, and enough back channel nonsense to make a compliance officer sweat through a blazer. But the basic grammar has changed. Charisma can now invoice. That is the Pavia shift. Pavia is valuable not only because he can play, he is valuable because he makes the institution feel less institutional. He turns Vanderbilt from a brand trying to appear competitive into a story that people can repeat. And stories are money. The old Vanderbilt posture, especially around the Derrick Mason era, existed under a different cultural logic. Vanderbilt football had to fight the weight of the school's own self-concept, academic seriousness, SEC membership, limited football mythology compared to the giants around it, a cautious athletic identity, a program trying to become dangerous without looking like it had betrayed the library. That creates a strange kind of athletic conservatism, not political conservatism, institutional conservatism, a fear of too much unruliness, a fear of too much spectacle, a fear of a player becoming louder than the house style. Drop a Diego Pavia archetype into that older logic, and the system might not know what to do with him. Too cocky, too combustible, too hard to sand down, too willing to make the game feel personal, too able to become the headline. But in the NIL era, that same danger becomes the premium feature. The cockiness is not the bug, the cockiness is the monetizable signal. The player who once might have triggered correction now triggers donor imagination. The athlete who once would have been told to represent the university better is now part of how the university gets represented at all. That is a massive reversal. It is not just that Pavia can earn, it is that the system has to admit the source of value was never just performance. It was performance plus character heat. Performance gets you evaluated. Character heat gets you circulated. The legal fight over eligibility matters because it makes the market visible. Once the argument becomes tied to lost NIL earning opportunity, the old amateur container starts cracking in public. The athlete is no longer just asking to play. He is asking not to be blocked from the economic life his own spectacle creates. That is a different moral universe, but more importantly, it is a different pricing universe. And this is where the Pavia and Ella connection gets sharp. Ella's image turns regional femininity into a scalable visual product. Pavia's image turns regional athletic defiance into a monetizable institutional asset. Both are examples of the same conversion process. Roughness becomes yield. Specificity becomes distribution. Identity becomes inventory. The public calls it personality. The market calls it addressable attention. Now let's talk about Theo Von, because Theo is the switchboard. That is what he is, a switchboard. He connects worlds that should not connect cleanly. Comedy, sports, country music, recovery language, southern weirdness, masculine awkwardness, celebrity access, working class memory, internet clip culture, and a kind of emotional damage that somehow comes out funny before it comes out sad. Theo does not just interview people, he decorporatizes them. That is his value. Put a guest in a normal press environment and they become smaller. They become managed. They become answer-shaped. They become careful. Put them with Theo and the frame changes. The room stops feeling like media. It starts feeling like somebody left a camera on during a conversation that should have happened near a vending machine, outside a motel, after a family reunion went badly. That is not an insult. That is the product. Theo's whole advantage is that he makes people look less edited, even when the appearance itself is part of a promotional cycle. That is authenticity infrastructure. He is not authenticity itself. He is the medium that makes authenticity legible. When Ella sits with him, she gets to move out of polished artist mode and into weird room mode. That matters. It tells the audience she can survive outside the careful frame. She can be beautiful without becoming brittle. She can be styled without becoming sterile. She can be a campaign asset and still laugh inside a chaotic room. When Theo comes out as Stagecoach, the stunt works because it violates the expected grammar of the festival guest reveal. People expect another artist, maybe a bigger singer, maybe a duet partner, maybe a Nashville adjacency. Instead, Theo appears. That is not just surprise, that is category breach. And category breach is one of the strongest ways to create virality because the audience has to resolve the mismatch. Why is he here? Why does this work? Why does this feel wrong and correct at the same time? That is the clip. That is the share. That is the laugh. That is the emotional residue. Pavia works the same way. Theo near Pavia makes the quarterback feel less like an NCAA asset and more like folklore. It turns the football story into a comedy-adjacent mythology. Suddenly, Vanderbilt football is not just scores and rankings. It is mothers, bets, sideline bits, weird interviews, online jokes, and the feeling that something alive is leaking out of the institution. That is powerful because institutions are starved for aliveness. They have money, they have logos, they have lawyers, they have communications departments, they have risk controls. What they often do not have is aliveness, so they rent it from people who look hard to manage. That is the brutal part. The institution spends decades trying to eliminate chaos. Then the culture changes, and the institution realizes chaos is the only thing people still believe. So it invites chaos back in through the side door, but only the right kind. Controlled chaos, sponsor-friendly chaos, clip-ready chaos, chaos that can sell denim, sell tickets, lift NIL value, move podcast traffic, and make an overmanaged world feel like it still has blood in it. Theo understands this instinctively. He knows elite spaces are not as serious as they pretend to be. He knows famous people want to seem normal without losing status. He knows the audience wants access without the dead feeling of access journalism. He knows the funniest thing in America right now is watching institutions try to hug the exact roughness they used to reject. And that is why he connects to Ella. That is why he connects to Pavia. Not because the industries are the same, because the underlying need is the same. Country needs friction. College football needs friction. Fashion branding needs friction. Podcasting sells friction by the pound. Section 5, the new Southern export. So look, the clean thesis is this. The old South rewarded obedience through institutions. The new Southern spectacle economy rewards identity that can travel. If your accent can travel, you win. If your haircut can travel, you win. If your chip on the shoulder can travel, you win. If your weirdness can travel, you win. If your regional specificity becomes legible to people who have never lived anywhere near the region, you have crossed from local personality into exportable myth. That is the actual game. Ella Langley is not just a country singer in this frame. She is a carrier of exportable Southern femininity, not soft in the old way, not polished in the corporate way, not rebellious in the fake way. Something more commercially useful than that. Feminine, visible, funny, styled, exhausted, self-aware, and just rough enough to make the polish believable. Diego Pavia is not just a Vanderbilt quarterback in this frame. He is a carrier of exportable athletic defiance. He makes an academic institution feel dangerous. He makes the underdog story feel monetizable. He makes the old amateur language look like a bad disguise for a market that already knew he had value. Theo Von is not just a comedian in this frame. He is a carrier of exportable disorder. He gives polished spaces permission to look human. He turns proximity into mythology. He makes celebrity feel like it might still have a porch attached to it. And once you see those three roles, the whole triangle becomes obvious.